Chapter 53, Left Hand of God. In outer space, a massive ship made from adamantine comes around the blue gas giant of Aurora. The vessel is shaped like a hollowed-out 9-mile-long railgun. A gyroscope acts as the blast chamber. The innards of the ship glow red with aethernight. Macon-wearing ghostlight amulets load larger aethernight cores into the rings of the gyroscope. The megaton guns only use one large core each, while the gyroscope takes 48 on its smallest ring. Back on the bridge of the Iron Jacket, Nar-Rokan is stripped of his armor and rendered first aid to his mangled leg. Hannibal explains to Rhea what the left hand of God is, while the last of the jets touch down on the runway as the Iron Jacket prepares to depart the planet with Red Cloud in tow. Hannibal. When Drake had slain the last Imperator, Prince Galavant, all that was left of him was his left hand, and they managed to turn it into a weapon. Once the last aethernight core is loaded, the Macon climb to the ship's outer hull to avoid the blast. A bright red laser beam shoots from the vessel. As the apocalyptically violent beam passes the blue gas giant of Aurora, it leaves an indention in the sapphire giant, dispersing and compressing its gaseous state as the beam barrels pass towards Aurora. Andrew lies against the ground, out cold. Two beams of light followed by two hellish roars shoot off into the sky. This was the Iron Jacket and Red Cloud departing the planet. Andrew's eye starts to twitch as if he's dreaming. In his dream, he is helping Yato work on an antique tractor. Still in his teens, Andrew is wide-eyed and quiet, watching. Yato asked Andrew to pass him a tool, and Andrew does as so. Andrew. You know, in those old stories, it never made sense to me why the Yahi surrendered, but that is supposed to be Yahi's defining quality, or so you say, or should I say, demonstrate. Yato. What made you think of that? Andrew. Well, you've been working on this for as long as I can remember. Most people would have thrown in the towel. The stubbornness is there, so why did we surrender? Yato. We didn't. The Yahi were the only ones never to bow to the Emperor. Never forget that we are a free people. The war with Praxis ended on our terms. We didn't give up. He did. Andrew's eyes peer open. The antimatter is inches away from his fingertips. Andrew's eyes jump open, and he reaches for the antimatter when a white adamantine boot stomps on it. Andrew looks up to see Drake standing over him, with the staff of Ammit raised high above his head. Andrew rolls over on his back and sees the sky part, and the heavens start to rumble as a massive arch of red light comes down on top of them. The gyroscope atop Drake's staff activates, unleashing a force field that encapsulates the two of them. The blast from the left hand of God sunders the continent under its discharge. The gyroscope starts to bend and break, but it holds out long enough. Once the blast had dissipated, the force field disappeared. The ground was flat and glowing red around them. Drake then purposely drops the broken staff of Ammit on Andrew. Drake then scoops up the antimatter and takes off up the mountain. Andrew's legs had finally regenerated. He makes it to his feet and runs after Drake. It is obvious to the fleet above that the antimatter was not set off. They decide to jump the left hand of God closer to the planet. In suspension directly above the planet, nearly touching the atmosphere. The vessel can be seen from below on the surface of the world. The Mycan astronauts begin to reprime the weapon. Halfway up the mountain, Abaddon tackles Drake, and they are quickly locked in a mortal struggle. Their Titan blades are drawn, and they sound like thunder when they clash. Andrew catches up and wastes no time joining the fight as he draws his Titan blade along with the custody arm. Abaddon surprisingly holds his own against Drake and Andrew's two blades. Abaddon's legions arrive and begin to surround and fire on Drake and Andrew. Overhead, the sky parts yet again as another red glint of light consumes the sky. The left hand of God had just fired again. Abaddon drops his axe. He then catches Andrew's swing at the hilt of his sword. Andrew refuses to let go and is tossed around by Abaddon. Drake takes a swing at Abaddon, and the same thing happens. Standing much taller than Andrew and Drake, Abaddon can simultaneously pick them off their feet. The beam in the sky is about to crash down on them when Abaddon slams Andrew and Drake's swords together. Abaddon channels all three of their powers into a beam that counters and redirects the beam right back at the left hand of God. It is almost a repeat of when Abaddon destroyed the reserve fleet. The left hand of God is decimated in the sky, along with all surrounding Imperial vessels, although Nero had the wits about him to pull most of his ship away from the left hand of God when it had descended level with the fleet. As the vessels plummeted towards the planet, they began to fire, unleashing nuclear salvos on all surrounding ships. Abaddon had already possessed the undead on the destroyed vessels almost instantly. The surrounding intact fleet quickly retaliates by pummeling the hijacked vessels into the earth below with overwhelming firepower. The remaining fragments of the left hand of God create a meteor shower overhead. Drake's heart had stopped yet again. While Andrew thrashes at Abaddon, they are all three buried by a rock avalanche before anything can transpire. Abaddon emerges with the antimatter and makes his way back to the palace where the last of his hordes are amassing to protect him. Lightning then begins to burst from the collapsed rock. Drake then emerges, having been revived. He takes off again toward the top of the mountain. On the other hand, the avalanche pushed Andrew back into the valley. He is the last to emerge. As Andrew emerges, massive Imperial vessels begin to crash down around him like mountains of iron raining down from the sky. Hordes of undead charge around him but pay him almost no mind as they stampede up the mountain to stop Drake. A fault line opens from the constant crashing of miles of metal. Andrew tumbles deep into the fault line. Hordes of undead boots trample and leap over the cracked earth. As Andrew makes his way to the surface, the undead jump and pile in on top of him. Andrew lets loose an atomic wave with his Titan blade to clear a path to the surface. Drake catches up with Abaddon and chases him through the palace complex while he mulches down the undead hordes that try to pile in on top of him. Andrew jumps in and attacks Abaddon as well. The three of them begin to clash once again. Abaddon charges up his Titan blade, grabs Drake's Titan blade mid-swing, and then unleashes a multi-kiloton yield blast that sends Drake flying. Abaddon had latched onto Drake's sword, stripping Drake of his blade. Andrew happened to latch onto Abaddon in time not to be thrown away. Abaddon, now wielding two Titan blades, Andrew draws his custody arm to counter this. They are locked in a violent clash of thunderous blades. Andrew catches Abaddon's axe with his custody blade and ejects it from Abaddon's hand. Andrew then takes a quick stab at Abaddon's exposed side, but Abaddon leans out of the way in time, grabs Andrew by the throat, and choke slams him against the ground. Abaddon craters the ground with Andrew. Andrew's head droops lifelessly for a split second, but he is right back, thrashing at Abaddon, although he had dropped his Titan blade. Drake comes back on the scene and clutches Abaddon's Titan blade. Now in arm's reach and unarmed, Drake begins to lay into Abaddon's face with his fist, pulverizing it, punching so hard and fast that each swing creates a sonic boom like a jet breaking the sound barrier. Drake's attack was brutal, feral, and supernatural. Abaddon picks Drake up and hurls him against the wall with his free hand. Andrew lunges towards his own Titan blade, but within a blink of an eye, Abaddon kicks it up into his own hand and stabs Andrew mid-lunge through the heart. Abaddon picks Andrew up with the Titan blade and impales him on a nearby pillar. The blade goes silent. Life fades from Andrew's eyes. Abaddon, you thought you were going to get the jump on me, bastard. Andrew's head hangs down lifelessly. Andrew wakes up in a lab in some Imperial facility. Michael is there as well. Andrew, where are we? Michael points towards a two-way glass. On the other side were Abaddon and Lilith. Andrew witnesses Lilith programming Abaddon to listen to her hypnotic and possessing words. She uses the exact phrase in Latin as earlier, except with extra wording. Silentium est aureum. Michael looks at Andrew when Lilith is done. Michael, do you remember those words? Andrew shakes his head up and down. Michael, good. Michael puts his hand on Andrew's shoulder. Andrew's head jumps back up. Not even a second had passed. He then grabbed Abaddon's hand, to Abaddon's shock, and slid himself down the sword. Andrew, with bated breath, speaks Lilith's phrase into Abaddon's ear, Silentium est aureum. Abaddon freezes and drops to his knees, dropping Andrew with the Titan blade still impaled through his chest. Andrew grabs Drake's sword, which lies beside Abaddon, pulls it back, and drives it through Abaddon's skull. Andrew stabbed Abaddon in his eye socket, and the back of the blade stuck out of the top of Abaddon's skull, almost splitting his head in half. That instant, Abaddon's undead legions drop in place. The one eye still unscathed on Abaddon twitches and rolls into the back of his head. Andrew lets go of the Titan blade, and Abaddon slumps over. Andrew scoots against the wall and pulls his own Titan blade from his chest. Embers begin to pour out of the wound as it is barely healing. Andrew hears Abaddon's voice in his head. "Abaddon, you have stopped nothing." Drake approaches Abaddon from his back, limping and dragging Abaddon's axe. Drake's eyes glow like the sun while a plasma ring radiates over his head. Andrew replies, "You're not Abaddon. I know who you are, Tiamonte." That instant, time froze, and Snowfall stopped in midair. Drake had raised his axe to behead Abaddon but was petrified like a statue, frozen in place. The surrounding undead raise their heads and look at Andrew with flaming eyes. A roaring voice shakes the palace. "Tiamonte, how do you know that name? Who are you?" "Andrew, the end of you." Tiamonte laughs. "You are nothing. My armies will fall on you like a never-ending rain of fire. My legions will blot out the sky." A familiar voice interrupts the demon's chuckles. "Hell is cold for now, but on that day, the universe will invert. The light will turn to dark, and the dark will turn to light. Up will become down, and down will become up, and all that is left behind will die a second time, and you know who I am." Michael sits on the desolated throne and stares down at the demon. Time unfreezes, and Drake brings the axe down on Abaddon's neck, severing his head. Drake looks down at Andrew with a menacing glare. Andrew raises his left hand when out of nowhere, his phoenix amulet sucks him through a rift.